Good afternoon, dear children. Today we will be continuing with the methods of soil conservation. In the previous class, I gave you an introduction of all the methods which are involved, like your afforestation, your restricted grazing, and the essential farming techniques which are required. And there are more than 5 or 6 farming techniques which we will be discussing. And then we have the two major ways by which we can increase the fertility of the soil. Those also which we will be discussing today only, and along with the basic one, that is the flood control. How can all of these help or conserve or protect the soil, which is most important for us, that will be discussed. Here are all the ways of soil conservation which we will be discussing, and I'm very sure that you will understand the meaning, that is the ways or the methods. If I simply ask you, just give me two ways or two methods by which we can increase the soil fertility, then we should be sure that we are not mentioning any of those apart from crop rotation and fallowing. Now, if I ask you, give me any two ways of soil conservation, so you can give me any of the two given in the green, that is afforestation, because those are the specific ways. Under those ways, like the one efficient farming technique, under that way there are different techniques that we are using. Now this contour tilling or contour plowing is not a way in its own. It's a technique which is coming under the heading of efficient farming. In the previous classes homework, most of you had done that mistake. That is why I am discussing it again in detail today. So the first and foremost one is afforestation. Let us understand the meaning of the word afforestation. Now it is the planting of new trees in the areas which are prone to soil erosion, and specifically those areas which are along the banks of the rivers or the steep slopes along your mountains or your valleys and your wasteland area where nothing can grow easily, and specifically, or any uncultivated area also. Any of those areas, when we are planting the trees, we are making sure we are planting those indigenous trees like your neem, peepal, ashok, all these banyan tree, all these trees are called indigenous trees, and therefore we are making sure that the roots are actually holding along the soil, because the trees are going to hold back the soil with the help of their roots. As the trees grow taller and they become older, their roots become very long and they go deep inside the ground, and the network of roots inside the soil, it holds the entire soil together. And specifically it's useful during the rainy season. It's not going to let the soil run away in its easier or in a very smooth manner through the water. So here I have mentioned all the three basic points which are actually very useful points for afforestation. If the question is asked, why are we doing afforestation, or what is the importance of afforestation, you can simply mention these 4 points and then you will understand. Number one, which I have just explained, that the trees hold back the soil with the help of their roots, especially during the rainy season when the water is making the soil loose. Therefore, the roots are holding on to it very firmly. The second point, which is written, that is this extension of the first one, that the deep roots of the trees aid in water retention capacity of the soil. Now, to understand this, when the roots are going deep into the soil, obviously they are going to make furrows and going to make holes inside the earth surface. So when the rain drops, the water also percolates along with those crevices and the cracks which have been created by the roots of the trees. So the water is continuously seeping inside the earth or the layers of the soil, and it is creating a reservoir, that is the water table below the earth's surface, that which we can see. So it helps in the water retention capacity of the soil also. The third one, the trees act as a vegetative cover for the soil, preventing soil erosion by wind. Soil erosion by wind. Specifically, it is not going to allow the wind to carry along with it the loose material of the soil. It is also a very effective means to create the forest cover. How? Because when we are planting those trees, those indigenous trees that we mentioned, like your neem, peepal, ashok, banyan, those long living trees, and they're very, very useful. So when they are planting those trees and the shrubs all along in those barren areas, they are significantly going to help in the soil conservation, because while we are planting them, we are using the eco-friendly fertilizers also, and we are making sure that the trees are going to have a long life, because we are planting those type of trees and making sure that the entire area is covered gradually, and it creates a nice forest cover in a barren land area. So that is all which is comprising of afforestation. Next is the restricted grazing areas for animals. And here we can simply understand, when a simple method of soil conservation is to restrict the grazing of animals in a particular area for long. Sheep and goats obviously are going to graze on the grasslands and in and around the forest area where they can actually get greener pastures. So when the cattle graze on fields, grass and the smaller plants get torn from their roots, which leaves the soil loose, and the soil is exposed to wind and water. Therefore, it is easily eroded. Now, if the grass is there and small shrubs are going to hold on to the soil, then the soil erosion will not take place so easily with the water which is moving along in the form of rain, or in the form of a small stream which is passing by. And secondly, what happens when the animals are grazing in one particular area again and again, the pressure of the animal hooves on the soil make it loose, and because of that, there is the structure of the soil becomes very loose, the compactness is lost, or the cohesion is exposed to the forces of wind and water, and therefore it leads to a lot more loose soil which is very, very easily subjected to erosion. So land meant for grazing of cattle should be especially selected and fenced off, and moreover the land should be continuously should be changed. They should not be allowed to graze in one area for longer time. Simple as that. So this is the meaning of restricted grazing areas for animals. Next, when we are talking of the increasing soil fertility by the crop rotation and fallowing method. Now, how are we increasing the soil fertility? By these two simple methods. The first one is the rotation of crop. The name itself is very, very self-explanatory. Under crop rotation, we have very simple method of growing different crops and cereals in different time. That means continuously, if we are growing wheat year a month after year, we are not going to do that. Once we will be growing maize, and the other time we will be growing wheat. That is when in alteration. Simply, crop rotation means alteration. Like we are not continuously going to wear a school dress every day. So in alteration, we are going to wear the school dress and the dress which we wear at home. So that is rotation. Simple word, but very simple to understand in the terms of crops also. Like once we are growing wheat, and the next time when we have to grow something, the wheat has been harvested, then we'll be growing maize, and then again the wheat, because the nutrients of the soil are just the same, or even if we are adding fertilizers, the same amount of nutrients which are required for the cultivation of wheat will be required from the soil again and again. So if we do it in rotation, the nutrients which are required by the wheat are not the same as what will be required by the maize. So the soil has a self rejuvenating time for itself, so that after 4 or 5 months, when we harvest the maize crops, then we have a soil which has easily rejuvenated itself and has got those nutrients back which it had already given to the wheat, and so the soil is fertile again for the wheat crop to be grown. That is the meaning of crop rotation. Now I would request everybody to open their books and mark the 3 points in the crop rotation. Kindly open your books to page number 63. Here we need to mark a very important give reason question. That is, when to prevent the decline in soil fertility. If we simply ask you, what is the importance of crop rotation? Then we need to know what is the important. Number one, it adds nutrients. Secondly, it helps in pest control. And the first one only is an extension. As to how it is adding nutrients, it helps to prevent the decline in soil fertility, and different crops are planted in sequential and systematic manner so that the nutrient depleting crop is grown, not grown continuously, as I explained earlier with the example of wheat and crop. The wheat and corn, or the maize that we call, which we are growing in alternate manner, is actually going to help the soil regain its fertility in the desired nutrients. After a prolonged time, when the maize was growing, it was actually automatically rejuvenating itself in terms of the depleted nutrients which it gave to the wheat crop. And there are some legumes also which are grown in between. Now, what are legumes? Legumes are plants which have some beans, and when those beans and the leaves are left in the field itself and not plucked or not used extensively, or major part of it is left to just give the fertility, give to the soil back. That is, it is just grown out there and left on the farm itself so that it can actually give the soil back the nutrients which were depleted while we were growing the major crops like the wheat and maize. So legumes are grown. Now this is alfalfa. It's also a grass which is basically a pastoral grass. And beans, peas, all of these are called legumes. They come under the family of legumes. They are soya bean and groundnut also come under the family of legume. So these are, and the cereals are maize and wheat, which are grown in rotation. So there are three kinds of crops that are being grown. That is your cereals, your legumes, and all of them are in rotation. So this is a complete meaning of crop rotation. Then comes fallowing. Now what is fallowing? Very simply, the land is left barren and it is allowed to rest. Then comes the efficient farming techniques, and in this the first one that we are going to discuss is contour tilling or contour plowing. That is, plowing is done along the entire contours. That means the plowing is done along the outline of the field in a circular manner, and this prevents the soil from being washed away by the running water. And here you can see each step that we are looking at, it is creating a bund. That means at the end of each step there is a outline which is a little raised one, and the tilling or the plowing is done in between. The brown area is plowed and the crops are grown out there, whereas this entire step or the raised bunding area helps the water to be retained in the particular area, and the soil also, it will not allow the water to take along the soil with it, because these boundaries or the bunds will stop the overflowing of the water with the soil along with it. Next is terrace farming. Now terracing of hill slopes is very effective in controlling soil erosion. How can we understand that? The terracing is the cutting into the hill slopes in a series of large steps. You can see the huge steps. Wait a minute. Here you can see clearly it is the cutting into the hill slopes in a series of large steps made up of flat fields. So this entire area becomes a flat field. Now these are large steps and they are done in a contour manner. That means in a successive manner they have been cut and you have large flat areas in between. So since the land is made flat, so what is going to happen? It will reduce the surface runoff. That means whatever loose soil is here, it is not going to run off easily, thereby preventing erosion. Point number one. Secondly, it will also facilitate the absorption of water into the soil, because if it's a flat area, the water will stay there and it will not continue to flow down or along the slope. So when we are cutting these terraces, we are creating a flat land in between. So the water is going to stay there and the percolation of water is going to be faster, and it will actually increase the absorption of water into the soil. So, and this kind of cultivation is very common along the mountain slopes all over the world. The next technique is the strip cropping. Now, strip cropping is another farming technique that helps to reduce soil erosion. Now, strip cropping is planting of alternate rows of different kinds of crops instead of leaving strips of land uncultivated. So here you can see there's one crop which is green and the other one which is already ripe and it is seen as a brown strip. So you have two different types of crops growing in this field. In this picture also, here also you can see that the crops are planted in the narrow strips. Now this strip cropping technique is also known as multiple cropping. Now with the alternate strips that contain the soil protecting plants such as the bushes or the trees. Here you can see some flowers are growing. So these are basically some kind of flowers which have been grown, or some kind of a bush which is actually going to help the soil conserve its fertility, or maybe there is some medicinal value to it, due to which there will be fewer insects in the field, or they might just protect this entire strip of crop which is growing and it seems to be already harvested. So it might be giving some medicinal value to it, or there may be some kind of it might be some kind of a legume which is going to give a lot more nutrient back to the soil while it decays there itself. The last technique is the contour bunding. Now in contour bunding, the soil is conserved by making bunds or walls or embankments which are made up of mud. So here you can see the area is divided into strips and these bushes are acting as a bund. Sometimes it is a wall which is made out of mud, and as you must have seen in your garden also, the gardener continues to make some bunds like this. Here you can see the embankment or the outline wall so that the water stays inside this. You must have heard that word kyari. The word kyari is commonly used by the gardeners in our gardens, that he's making those in which the saplings or the plants are just uh, plants are allowed to grow out there with a lot more water which they require, so the water can stay inside that and not flow outside. That is why that bunding is done or the kyari is made. But here in the contour bunding, the embankment made of mud along the contour lines is made to prevent water from draining out of the cultivated field. Thereby, it also prevents soil erosion. Now, with the techniques of farming, we have come to the end of the chapter, but I would request everybody to open their books to page number 64, because the homework that I have given you, explain the role played by the soil in the world health growth, number 1, growth and development of the country, point number 2, and environment stability. How is it playing its role in the three sectors? World health. What is it? What is the soil giving us that it is providing the health of the entire world? Growth and development of a country. How is it helping in that? And in the environmental stability. What is the contribution of soil in environmental stability? I want a description of all the 3 points separately, and this question can be asked in various forms, as in what is the importance of soil? Why do you think the soil is important for our survival? Or what is the use of soil? If soil would not be there, then we would not be asked to wash our hands continuously and we would be so safe from all the microorganisms present in the soil. Then why do we have soil? All these types of questions can come, but the answer will nearly be the same, but you have to frame it in your own words to fit the question. And those can also be in the application based question or the comprehension based question. It can simply be asked as, what is the need to conserve the soil? Let it flow fluently. What is the harm in letting the soil get eroded from one place to the other? As it is, we've learnt about aggradation and degradation. Then what is the use? All these questions are very important to think over and write. Now, I've discussed the entire chapter with you, given you the uses of the soil also, but make sure you write the answer in your own words. And before I end, we have a very beautiful paragraph given at the end of your chapter that is about your One Mahotsav, that it is a program that has started by the government of India, and it was started in 1950 to maintain the ecological balance. Now, what are we doing to prevent the depletion of the ozone layer? We are planting more and more trees. We had done an entire 2 chapters in GK in class 6 also, in the respect of trees, what the people are doing on, and the number of activists which are working for the conservation of the ecological balance on our planet Earth. All of that you can include while you are writing about the importance of soil, because that will be covering the environmental stability point of your work. Let us quickly do the back exercises. The first one says distinguish between each of the following pairs: degradation and aggradation. Obviously, we understand the terms reduction of soil in one place and increase in the level of the soil area in the other, where the soil is being deposited through erosion. You can write that easily. I'm just doing it in brief so that you have an idea. Weathering and erosion. Now, weathering involves the breaking up of the rocks in the surface itself where the parent rock is. And erosion, simply understood, the process from which the weathered material is transported somewhere else. Then comes your granular disintegration and exfoliation. Granular, grain by grain, the weathering will take place, and exfoliation, due to the cooling and the heating effect, you will have an entire layer which peels off. The outer layer continues to suddenly peels off and breaks off from the rock itself, not grain by grain. Hydration and solution. Now here, hydration, when the water itself combines with the mineral components of the rock and leads to disintegration of the rocks. And in solution, the minerals in the rock disintegrate due to the presence of some chemicals along with water, and that is the basic difference. Here only the water is working, here the chemicals present in the minerals are working. Then we have soil erosion and soil conservation. Soil erosion is the washing away or the removal of the layers of soil, and your soil conservation is the reverse of that. That means we are saving the soil from getting eroded, or we are trying to control the erosion of soil through various means and trying to preserve its fertility also by the other techniques like your fallowing and your crop rotation. Next comes your temperature changes results in physical weathering. Obviously, you have to give a geographical reason for all of these. So when we're talking of temperature changes, sudden cooling, constant cooling and constant high temperature during the day and low temperature during the night leads to physical weathering. Gases in the atmosphere affect weathering. Here you will mention your work of oxidation and your work of carbon dioxide. So both the processes of oxidation and carbonation will be mentioned here in the reason. Human activities affect weathering. Simply mining, agricultural activities lead to the weathering of the rocks. Now here comes the question again. Soil is a very important resource. I have given you the solution key, and in that I wrote 3 basic points. That is, humans are completely dependent on the soil, and all their needs like food, clothing, shelter, animals, everything, we are only surviving because the soil is there. Simply in one line, which I made you mark in the book also, you can write that. Here you don't need to go in detail because they're just asking for one specific reason. The second one, the last one here is there is a need for soil conservation. Here also you can understand the meaning. You just have to modulate your answer that if there would be no soil, what would happen? You would have no food, clothing and shelter. Simple as that. So we need to conserve the topsoil. Most important. I would request everybody to go through these long answers also. If you have any question or any query, kindly ask me on my WhatsApp, personal WhatsApp, or in the GCR. I'll be able to answer you. And here is a picture study. I would request everybody to go through it. And if you have any difficulty, please ask. Don't be hesitant. Please make sure you ask. Thank you, children.